Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to go my review of Monday Night Raw. Starting off the night, we have Gunther coming out to the ring, grabs a microphone, doesn't really say anything. He's interrupted by Damian Priest. Priest walks out to the ring, grabs a microphone. Priest mocks Gunther. Priest says at Survivor Series he's taking back the World Heavyweight title. After that, Gunther attacks Priest using the microphone. Priest then gets up, attacks Gunther as well. Priest then hits a Razor's Edge on Gunther, sending Gunther through the announce table. Moving on from that, we go into our first official match of the night. It is Dragon Lee teaming up with Rey Mysterio, taking on American Made in a Tornado Tag Team matchup. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between both teams with American Made keeping the pace of the match. Dragon Lee hits a Hurricane Rana. Rey then hits a springboard moonsault. Lee then hits a Hurricane Rana to the outside. Julius then hits a 450 for a near fall. Gable then attacked Rey Mysterio, which allowed American Made to hit a roll-up, pin for the 3, and your winners of the match are American Made. Hats off to American Made for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's for the Intercontinental Championship. It is Ludwig Kaiser taking on Braun Breaker. I thought it was a decent match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Kaiser and Breaker, with Kaiser and Breaker exchanging in the middle of the ring. Breaker then goes for an attack on the outside, but missed. Ludwig goes right through the table. But Braun was trying to keep the pace of the match. Braun hits a power slam. Braun then hits a Frankensteiner off the top rope on Ludwig. Ludwig gets up, hits an enziguri on Braun Breaker. Sheamus then comes out to the ring to attack Ludwig Kaiser. The match ends in a disqualification. Braun and Sheamus then both attack each other, leading up to the ramp. And then Adam Pearce comes out and announces that it will be Braun Breaker defending the Intercontinental title in a triple threat match at Survivor Series against Sheamus and Ludwig Kaiser. Definitely looking forward to that matchup at Survivor Series. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's for the Tag Team Championships. It is Judgment Day defending the Tag Team titles against the War Raiders. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between the War Raiders and the Judgment Day, with the War Raiders keeping the pace of the match. Judgment Day are here, Carlito and Dominic Mysterio. War Raiders hit a War Machine for a near fall, but Jade hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Judgment Day. Hats off to the Judgment Day for getting the win in that matchup and retaining the tag team titles. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night's tag team matchup. It's the New Day taking on Alpha Academy. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between the New Day and Alpha Academy, with Otis hitting the worm in the middle of the ring. Tozawa hits a finish, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Alpha Academy. After the match, you can see the New Day. It looks like they're all on their way out and done, even though that they are celebrating their 10th year anniversary next Monday Night Raw. But I will say this, man. Woods had some very choiceful things to say to Kofi Kingston and vice versa, man. So I think it was one hell of a promo back and forth between Woods and Kofi Kingston. After that, it was announced earlier in the night, it wasn't showcased, but they made another announcement later on in the night, that Adam Pearce announces that there will be a Women's Intercontinental Championship. And that he announces that there will be a women's tournament for the title starting next week. Now, I will talk more about this towards the end of the week, but again, I think this is a good thing for the women's division. I think it was a couple weeks ago that SmackDown introduced and announced the new U.S. women's title, so I guess Raw wanted to crown a women's Intercontinental title as well. So I will talk more about that towards the end of the podcast and give you guys my opinion about that as well. Moving on from that, we go into the main event of Monday Night Raw. It is Nia Jax taking on Bianca Belair for the advantage of Wargames. Now, whoever wins this match, their team will have the advantage going into Wargames. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Nia and Belair, with Nia keeping the pace of the match. Nia hits a Samoan drop on the announce table on Belair. Bayley comes out to the ring to attack Nia, which allowed Belair to hit a 450 off the top rope on Nia Jax. Pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match is Bianca Belair. Hats off to Belair for getting the win in this matchup. A couple of things I want to talk about, man, what pertains to Monday Night Raw before I get the hell up out of here. Number one, like I mentioned earlier, with the big announcement from Adam Pearce. Adam Pearce announced, and Adam Pearce is the general manager of Raw. He announced early in the show, it wasn't televised, and a lot of people were kind of a little pissed off about that, and then they eventually announced it later on in the night that Pearce announced that there will be a women's Intercontinental title on Monday Night Raw, and the tournament will start next week to crown the first ever inaugural women's Intercontinental champion. Now, A lot of people are not really keen on this. I've heard a lot of people say that they're not big fans of, the women, getting a U.S. title or getting an Intercontinental title championship belt. To me, I think that's crazy, to be honest with you. I think, if you look at what SmackDown and Raw has done, as of late, whether it's Rhea Ripley, Tiffany Stratton, Nia Jax, Liv Morgan, and that's just to name a couple. I mean, the women's roster on WWE is solid. It's probably, if not the best women's division on the planet in professional wrestling, next to NXT. NXT's women's roster is also pretty much the flagship of NXT with, the addition of Stephanie Vacour and Julia as well, and obviously other names that are coming into NXT as well. Jordan Grace might also make her way over to NXT. So, the main roster for the women, it's stacked. From top to bottom, from Charlotte to possibly the return of Becky Lynch, probably returning to Raw probably next year. You got Bayley, you got Jade Cargill, Belair, Nia Jax, Tiffany Stratton, Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley. I mean, you got a lot of names in that women's division. Meechin, Chelsea Green, Piper Niven. There's a lot of women, top names in the women's division on the main roster. I'm all for the women getting more TV time and more opportunities to showcase their craft. Absolutely. And I think what better way to do that with the addition of these championship belts, whether it be the U.S. women's title or the women's intercontinental title. I know it's been speculated for a while that there would be a women's, singles championship relatively soon. And now that we're here, with Nick Aldis announcing the U.S. women's title and with Adam Pearce announcing last night with the women's intercontinental championship, I mean, sky's the limit for the women on the main roster for WWE. And I think it's a great thing for both Raw and SmackDown and for WWE as a whole. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of things to look into when it pertains to Jade. The main vocal point, I think, last night was Bayley. And, obviously, Joe Tessitore and Wade Barrett were talking about the injury that Jade Cargill sustained at SmackDown when she was thrown off a loading bay and landed on top of a windshield, pretty much landing on a windshield on a car, which ultimately took her out of the Wargames matchup. But not only that, also took her out of the women's tournament for the women's U.S. title. Now, there's multiple ways that you can look into this. Obviously, no one knows currently who was the person that attacked Jade Cargill. Now, my two suggestions of this on who attacked, number one being maybe the most obvious, would possibly be Bayley. There's a little hostility here between Belair, Jade, and Bayley. Maybe the wild card might be Naomi. Who knows? But with Jade also being out of the tournament, it does beg the question, who is going to replace Jade Cargill, I believe, next week in the women's U.S. tournament. Now, Bayley's already a part of this tournament, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know who they're going to replace Jade with as far as who's going to be in this tournament. If I had to predict who I think might come in, I would say Charlotte Flair. I don't know if she's healthy or not, but if she is healthy, this would be the perfect way to bring in someone like Charlotte Flair. I don't see it being a Becky, maybe Alexa Bliss, maybe. But my cards are on Charlotte Flair as far as the tournament's concerned. Now, when it pertains to Wargames and Jade being out, to me, the writing's on the wall. I think Bayley is going to be the fifth member of the women's team not the women's team, but one part of the women's team for the women's Wargames. I think Bayley will join the likes of herself. Well, not herself. She would join Belair, Io Sky, and Rhea Ripley to do a 5v5 Wargames matchup for the women, taking on Nia Jax, Tiffany Stratton, and those names included. So, I mean, to me, Bayley is going to be the fifth member of that team. Jade, she did sustain an injury. She's going to be out for quite a while. Who knows when she will come back. It was a great way for her, them to kind of write her off TV. Obviously, she's dealing with some injuries. So, but my prediction, honestly, as far as the tournament's concerned, man, to replace Jade Cargill, I can see it possibly being Charlotte Flair. I know it's a hot take for a lot of people, maybe a wild card pick, but if Charlotte's healthy, I can see it being Charlotte Flair being a part of this tournament to crown the first ever inaugural women's U.S. champion. So, I mean, again, we're going to see what happens, man. I mean, I think if it is Charlotte Flair, then I would say then she probably has a lot of, people behind her to win the tournament, to be honest with you. I mean, Charlotte Flair is a household name. She's a multi-time women's champion. So if Charlotte Flair is, in fact, healthy, I could totally see, Charlotte Flair, taking that spot from Jade, with Jade being out with injury, to be a part of the U.S. women's tournament. So we're going to see what happens. But all in all, man, the build-up towards Survivor Series is absolutely great. Obviously we got the addition of the triple threat match with Braun Breaker defending the Intercontinental title against Ludwig Kaiser and Sheamus. I think that match is going to be an absolute banger. Survivor Series has a special start time I believe it's this Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I think they're live from Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. I'm definitely looking forward to it, man. Survivor Series has always been the top 4 pay-per-view for WWE, even from back in the day. So, and with the addition of Wargames, everybody and their grandmother is anticipating this men's Wargames matchup between the original Bloodline taking on the new Bloodline. And then even during the night on Raw, you could see Jimmy, Jay, and Zayn being interviewed backstage. And Zayn even mentioned how much can they really trust CM Punk. And Jimmy was like, oh, we can trust him. The wise man trusts him, everything else like that. I mentioned this, when this CM Punk for the SmackDown review. Is CM Punk the wild card in all this? Is he actually going to play ball and help out Roman? Or is he going to be the wild card in the fact that maybe he does not help out Roman? There's still a lot to be, going on here. But it was also announced that CM Punk will have a face-to-face meeting with Roman Reigns on SmackDown. So I'm definitely looking forward to that this Friday on SmackDown. But again, man, the build-up towards Survivor Series has been absolutely fantastic. I think for the Bloodline storyline to now the addition of who's going to replace Jade, I think that's also, exciting. Got a lot of emotion wrapped around that, a lot of intrigue going into Survivor Series. It also, like I mentioned earlier, who is going to replace Jade in the Women's U.S. title tournament? Is it going to be Alexa Bliss? Is it going to be Charlotte Flair? Who knows? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of moving parts with this, and that's why I try to tell you guys for the SmackDown review that there's levels to this shit, man. They're building storylines from just not only Survivor Series, but the next PLE, and slowly starting to build storylines towards WrestleMania. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens here, after Survivor Series. You got Damian Priest taking on Gunther for the World Heavyweight title. Will Priest beat Gunther and once again become a new World Heavyweight Champion? Is the original Bloodline finally going to get their just due by beating Solo Sikoa's Bloodline at War Games? Is CM Punk going to play ball? Who knows? Is Braun Breaker going to walk out Intercontinental Champion after he's taking on Ludwig Kaiser and Sheamus? Is Sheamus finally going to win the championship that's been pretty much the ghost of him, if you will, all this time? I believe the Intercontinental title was the only championship I believe Sheamus has not won yet to facilitate him being a Grand Slam champion. So, again, this is one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of questions going into Survivor Series that I don't think people are really looking into at all. I think Survivor Series from top to bottom of the card, man, is going to be absolutely incredible. From the Women's War Games matchup, obviously, to the Men's War Games matchup, Damian Priest taking on Gunther. It's going to be incredible. I know, and the other thing, too, that I want to talk about, I know a lot of people also are very pissed off that Cody Rhodes is not defending this belt or actually being a part of Survivor Series this coming weekend. I believe Cody Rhodes is not booked at all for Survivor Series, and instead, like I mentioned to you guys a couple weeks ago or last week, and I was 100% correct that I would not be surprised if they booked Rhodes versus Owens at Saturday night's main event, and that's exactly what happened. WWE had booked Rhodes versus Owens, I believe, in the main event of Saturday night's main event, December 14th. So again, Rhodes and Owens will not, from what I understand, will not be at Survivor Series this weekend. So I think a lot of people are kind of upset with the fact that Rhodes will not be a part of this year's Survivor Series. So again, it's going to be crazy, man. For what it's worth, I think Survivor Series is going to be fantastic. I think Raw last night, it wasn't a bad show. I think it was a great build-up towards Survivor Series, but it wasn't the best Raw of all time. No, but also some of these shows have also been taped because a lot of the superstars are going to see their family for the holidays, for Thanksgiving. By the way, if I don't get a chance to say it before then, hopefully you guys have a happy Thanksgiving this year. Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays of all time. Football, food. What else can you ask for? Time with family. So, definitely looking forward to that. So, again, if I don't get a chance to say it, or if I forget, I want to let you guys know that from my family to yours, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys out there are having a great time. Enjoy some good food, spend time with family, and watch these crazy football games that they got lined up for us for these Thanksgiving festivities. But besides all that stuff, man, at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to keep preaching this till the end of time, that, Raw and SmackDown continuously, and they have their flaws too. I'm not sitting here saying that Raw and SmackDown are perfect shows from top to bottom. They have their flaws. Nobody's perfect. But I will say this. If you look at a situation and I am going to compare and contrast here, okay? If you're going to look at a situation where you have this weekend being Survivor Series, okay, one of the most anticipated matches of all time being the men's war game matchup between Roman Reigns taking on Solo Sikoa's Bloodline. Okay, we just had AEW's Full Gear, and I mentioned this if you guys were watched that review. I said it was one of AEW's most confusing pay-per-views of all time. Why? Because of lack of storyline and a lack of build leading up towards Full Gear. There was really no story. There was no build to really sink your teeth into, and for fans to get invested into the product for Full Gear. Now you look at Survivor Series, and I'm gonna tell you right now, man, I would not be surprised if that show sold out. I think all the matches on that card are going to tear the house down, and that's one of the things that I wish AEW would do, is they would continue to build story and build intrigue around these matches, where you don't need 10 to 12 matches on the pay-per-view card, man. You get us 7 max of matches, and the most important matches with the most intriguing storylines, man. You're going to sell out every pay-per-view every single fucking time. And that's exactly what we're getting here with Survivor Series. Even with the Braun Breaker match that was announced last night from Pierce. I mean, obviously there's a lot of history and story here between Braun, Sheamus, and Ludwig Kaiser. They all have some kind of attachment to one another. So, I mean, again, what better way to finish this and squash all this shit between Breaker, Sheamus, and Ludwig than to have a triple threat match, and the winner of that match will be the new or still Intercontinental Champion. So, I'm all for it, man. And again, I will reiterate this as well. And I might be on a hill by myself on this, but that's fine with me. That I think the addition of the women's U.S. title and the women's Intercontinental title is a great thing for both Raw and SmackDown and all for WWE. It gets more eyes on the product. And I feel like, with fans, and I'm going to say this too, man. Number one, the women on the main roster and even NXT have been killing it, man. They have been doing a fantastic job with what they've been doing, whether it's NXT or the main roster, number one. Number two, rightfully so that these women, get an opportunity at another championship and more TV time for them to build their craft. Absolutely. But you also had to look in the aspect, I look at it, as a fan, I look at it for my wife, who's also a fan of wrestling, my sister. My baby sister is a huge fan of wrestling. Huge fan. She goes to independent shows all the time. And she talks about it constantly. I mean, my sister's been watching wrestling since she was a baby. You know what I mean? For the times from John Cena and all that stuff. And she's big fans of, Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, which is kind of crazy because they're both kind of rivals. But long story short, what I'm saying to you guys is that, obviously you're going to have those wrestling fans, I don't understand why they're showcasing the women or this, that, and the other. You gotta look at it like this, man. There's also kids that are watching these shows that are growing up, and these men and women are their heroes, man. They look up to these people, and it was the same thing for me when I was growing up watching wrestling too, man. This was, for me, watching wrestling as a kid was a chance for me to shut off and get away from the real world for a minute and actually enjoy the show. And I grew up idolizing these guys, man. These guys were my heroes, like Randy Savage, Ric Flair, Vader, the Great Muta. Obviously it's a lot different now than it was then, but I mean, I grew up watching these guys, the Steiners, the Road Warriors. And, Randy Savage, I'm a huge fan of Randy Savage. If you guys don't know that by now, a huge fan of Randy. I'm a huge fan of Dusty Rhodes and what he meant to the business. And the fact that sometimes he was overlooked because of the way he was, the way he talked and everything else. But I will say the guy has one of the best promos in all professional wrestling. And the guy can wrestle. The guy can still, with his size and stature, can still wrestle a 60-minute match, no problem. And he's done it multiple times. But long story short, I look at it like this, man. When you look at an AEW show or a WWE show, there's fans out there that are idolizing these people. And, they want the best for them because they're their favorite wrestler, man. Whether it's Bianca Belair or Becky Lynch or Charlotte Flair, there's a lot of women and girls out there that also watch professional wrestling that, like, man, we want the women to be showcased more and everything else like that. This is a great way for those women on the main roster to be showcased a lot more than what they have been. And rightfully so, because those women have busted their ass day in and day out, just like the men have, and deserve just as much, notoriety than the men do. Absolutely. They work twice as hard, if not harder than the men do, and I feel as if they have every right to have another singles championship, whether it be a U.S. title or an Intercontinental title, to showcase their talent, their skills, and to, have fans of theirs. Like I said, other women around the world or, girls that are fans of professional wrestling, now they can be like, oh, man, I wonder if Liv's going to win the belt or if Charlotte Flair's going to come back and win the U.S. title. You know what I mean? It gets excitement for them as well, and myself included. But I think people had to look at that as well, man. You can't just look at it like, oh, you know what? I don't understand why the women are getting more pushed than the men are, and all this other shit, and yada, yada, yada. This is bullshit. No, dude. If you honestly think like that, then get the hell out of here. To be honest with you, I got no time for you. You got no place here. Get the hell going. To be honest with you, because at the end of the day, at the core of it, the women are working just as hard as the men are, and vice versa, hands down. You know what I mean? So for these women to have the opportunity to have another championship, another opportunity to showcase their talent, and to be notarized for it, and have these accolades added to their career, yeah, man, I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. And it gives opportunities for people that you don't really get to see on TV that much. Like, for example, let's say Meechin wins the U.S. championship. I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. And a lot of people were picking her or Chelsea Green, those top two candidates to actually win the U.S. title. Why not? It showcased them more on TV. It gets more people in tune with what they're doing. Absolutely, man. I think people, podcasters out there, or, people that do what I do, or just fans of professional wrestling, if you're hating on this shit, man, I got no place for you, man. I want nothing to do with you. I really don't, because these women are tearing the house down, man. If you look at NXT, and you look, and I mentioned this multiple times in the past too, and I will reiterate this one last time. If you look at NXT and what NXT brought to the table with the black and gold brand, and Triple H and Shawn Michaels and William Regal were scouting talent on the indies all over the fucking world. All over the world. Whether it was the U.S. or overseas, all over the world. They were looking for talent, and they brought in some of the best independent talent in the world, man. From Gargano to Ciampa to, Aleister Black, Nikki Cross, Bayley, Sasha Banks. I mean, these women broke bread in NXT and built a character for them. Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Bayley, Sasha. You know what I'm saying? Shayna Baszler. Athena, a.k.a. Ember Moon, and her title run that she had. Shayna's title run. You know what I mean? Asuka and her title run that you got to look at, the narrative, bro. The women, are just a part of WWE than the men are. Absolutely. And the reason why I bring up NXT Black and Gold brand, because I was a huge fan of NXT Black and Gold, and if you weren't, then, that's on you, but I think it was one of the best parts of NXT. But if you look at NXT now, man, I mean, again, the women are, they're kicking ass down there in NXT. With Julia, Stephanie Vacour, Jordan Grace, who's currently with TNA, but NXT has a working relationship with TNA right now. But I can see Jordan Grace going over to TNA. Absolutely. Roxanne Perez. Sure. Absolutely. Cora Jade. So again, man, like, the women are getting their just due, and I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. I think it's a great deal. I think it's something that is going to be more intriguing for Raw and SmackDown. And to be honest with you, I think the biggest thing that I was worried about going into this, when these titles were being announced, and again, it might just be me, but I was worried. It's not so much with the SmackDown side. I was worried as all hell from the Raw side when they announced this Intercontinental title, man, because if you look at some of the titles they brought in, God, man, they were god-awful. Like, I was not a fan of the design and the whole idea of the 24/7 championship. It was one of the worst ideas WWE ever brought to the table, in my honest opinion. It really was. It was, to me, the 24/7 title was a knockoff of what the Hardcore Championship used to be back in the Attitude Era days, where you can defend it anytime, any place, anywhere. I remember seeing Crash Holly wrestle Kane in a goddamn ball pit for the Hardcore Championship, and the referees following Crash Holly around. Or, Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson beating the shit out of each other, and what gets hit with a goddamn champagne bottle and wins the Hardcore Championship. You know what I mean? The shit's crazy. Fighting backstage. Hardcore Holly fighting Al Snow in the middle of the goddamn woods for the Hardcore Champion. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly what the 24/7 Championship meant to me. And, yeah, okay, the concept worked then. It didn't really work now. And, I mean, the main person that held that belt consistently on and off was R-Truth. It made him relevant. But I just think right now, with the addition of the women's titles, I just think it's about damn time. To be honest with you, I really do. I mean, it's about damn time. Because, to be honest with you, right now, the women are firing all cylinders right now, man. And I think, why not? I can see Jade. My thing is, if Jade actually did not get hurt, was not injured and was written off TV, Jade might have been maybe a top 3 pick to possibly win that women's U.S. title. In my honest opinion, Jade, for what it's worth, I mean, credit, yes, she's been teaming with Bianca Belair, and I have a very hard standpoint on the women's tag team division. I think it's a waste of time. And the reason why I'm saying that, it's not because of the women. I'm saying it's a waste of time because WWE right now, whether it's Raw and SmackDown, don't have a roster of a tag team division for the women. They really don't. I mean, if you look at these tag team matches, a lot of the times it's Bianca and Jade going up against Damage Control or Pure Fusion Collective or Piper Niven and Chelsea Green. I mean, it's mainly those teams that are going up against each other on a consistent basis because right now they don't have enough women tag teams on the roster, and they're making these makeshift tag teams. And I think that's the other reason, like, in my honest opinion, I would completely dissolve the women's tag team championship belts, in my honest opinion, with the addition now having the Women's World Heavyweight Championship, the WWE Women's Championship, and now with the addition, as of recently, the Women's U.S. title as well as the Women's Intercontinental title. The women now have 4 championship belts, or titles, if you will, they can all go for, whether it's the main titles or the singles championships, whether it's the Intercontinental or the U.S. title. And I think the tag team division, the belts need to go. That whole concept is done, in my honest opinion. Because now the women have more to fight for rather than just the main championships now. You know what I mean? It clears up more ideas. It gets, more women to be on TV more often to showcase their talent and to actually have championships that they can represent and represent themselves with carrying those belts. So, I mean, I'm all for that, but I think the tag team titles, hopefully that goes away because there's no women's tag team division on Raw or SmackDown. There's like 4 teams and that's it. It's not there. In my honest opinion, that's the only thing I could say, I guess, negative right now when it pertains to the women on Raw and SmackDown is that right now they just don't have a tag team division to really grant a tag team championships because we're getting the same tag team matches from the women on a consistent basis, and I just think that well is run dry. That's my main thing. But like I said, long story short, I think Raw was not bad. It was not great. But I think at the end of the day, with the announcement of the Intercontinental title, the build-up towards Survivor Series, I'm definitely looking forward to Survivor Series this weekend. I hope you guys are as well. Like I said, Survivor Series has a special start time, 6 p.m. Eastern. I think they're live this weekend, I believe on Saturday from Toronto, Canada, I believe. Definitely looking forward to it. Like I said, Survivor Series is one of WWE's top 4 pay-per-views in the calendar year. Definitely looking forward to that. And again, I will also be giving you guys a review and my take on what I thought about this year's Survivor Series. But with that being said, this is my review of Monday Night Raw. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember,